I'm not in my best voice today, so I will speak from here. But I do have enough voice to give you everything I planned on giving you. I wanted to thank everyone who made this morning possible, to our musicians, our staff, our altar guild, the people who made our breakfast, including, he made the breakfast, then he came and read, but we had people cooking yesterday and today, a large team of people cleaning up. Michelle's done a lot of work to make sure the Easter egg hunt and the animals happen. So thank you, and thank you for being here for Easter. He has risen. You can say that. You can say, you can do either one, that's fine. All across the world, from the earliest moments of electronic transmission, human beings have been reaching out to the universe, wondering who might be there to hear us. Nikola Tesla stood on the plains of Colorado, staring at Mars, wondering if by the power of electricity and electromagnetism, he could reach out to the Martians and they could hear us and we could hear them back. Though probably all he heard was Enrico Marconi in Italy trying to do the same thing. How much money have we invested setting up satellites and radio antenna, pointing our ears to the farthest depths of the solar systems and galaxies, wondering if there is some higher wisdom, some stronger power, some greater race who might hear us and reach out to us. We recorded the best of human culture on a golden record and sent it far outside our solar system, and it will play into perpetuity, maybe even beyond our civilization, hoping that there will be someone who responds. And we hope they are benevolent and good. And if they're not, then we will be their new slaves, because of course, if they can hear us and reach us, they will be much better and stronger than we. On this Easter, as we reach out, hoping to find connection to some superintelligence, some being who can guide us in our way, we find out that maybe all of that technology and all of those satellites, all of those antennae and all of those recordings should have been pointed toward a tomb in Jerusalem. Should have been pointed to a place where the stone rolled away and now that grave is empty. And were it today, they would have told Jesus, now the cameras will be there at 1 in the morning, and the journalists will be there, and the streamers, and then you'll be interviewed, and don't forget to really come out and look surprised and look like you were dead. And there would be a huge press conference, and Jesus would stand up, and he would say, "People of earth, do not be afraid. I do not come to harm you, but I am your new leader." Now again, if he was malevolent, he would say, "I am your new overlord." Jesus could have done that, had he chosen to. He could have broadcast every brain and spirit in the earth. I have risen, and now there is a new regime under which all the world will live. And you have to realize what's happening is Easter happened in time, but it is the new singularity of the future, but it's in time. So at some point, all of reality will collapse into the singularity of Easter, meaning all mass, all history will collapse into this moment. It is a future that your life has not yet caught up to, but it is the future, even as it exists now in the present. But he chooses not to do that. God is very quiet about God's work, even though God's people love noise, and we love to be startled, and we love to be shaken. God does everything very quietly. Jesus doesn't make noise, maybe the scraping of the stone, the gasping of a first breath, and then Jesus is on his way. And it's precisely in that silence that now the work of transmitting this gift has been passed to those who will become witnesses, and they will share it one at a time, person to person. God is very patient across time. And never confuse God's patience for indifference, because you will hear that God will be back to judge according to this gift. God is very patient. Now, one of the great gifts about today is people will say, now it's Easter, I hope you're feeling good, I hope you're feeling joyful, I hope you will be glad, and I do hope all those things. But that's not what happened on Easter. When those people went and they were confronted with this stone and the problem of the stone so they could care for the corpse of a loved one, they were surprised to find out he was not there, and it didn't say, and then they left going, well, thank God he's not dead. What are we going to do with all these spices? Instead, it says they were terrified and they were afraid. And so this will be the one Sunday, at least of the year, and maybe the one Sunday of the time that we are in this church together, that I hope Easter terrifies you, and I hope it makes you afraid. I hope it shakes all of your certainties. I hope it shakes everything you think you know about the world and about how things work and about who has power and who is weak, about who is strong and who is right. I hope it shakes all of that. And you don't understand, because really you're going, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. I hope there's still burritos after church, that's fine. He seems to be saying that. I'll give you a story of someone who is terrified by Easter. And this is a story that happened in my life and in my time. And in fact, there might be someone here who knows this person, if in fact they made it to church today. When I moved to Huntington Beach 6 years ago, I received an email, and some of you have heard this story. And the person in the email said, I was never going to tell you what happened to me, but now that you're leaving, what difference does it make whether you know or not? And when someone starts an email that way, it's like, here we go. Let's see what they have in store, you know. She said, my father was a Catholic priest in South America, and he won the lottery. And after he won the lottery, he left the priesthood. And then he moved to the American Southwest, and he met a woman, and they got married. She was younger than he was. They had a child, and then he got sick as he aged, and when the child was an adolescent, he died. The mother started dating, and she got remarried, and the person she married was a monster, a terrible man, an evil man. I won't describe what he did to her. I will just say she spent many days under his weight and under his terror. And one day, he was abusing her, and she said to God, kill me. I hope you kill me. I can't do this anymore. Kill me. And in that moment, she went into a space of light, and she said, I felt love pressed onto my body. I've never felt, this is what the Bible means by God's glory, that the love presses you. It has its own gravity. That's what I mean. When the singularity of Easter happens, you're going to feel it in your flesh. And she said, I heard three voices speaking. One was my father who had died. One was a voice I didn't recognize, and one was a third voice that was spoken as from a speaker that had been blown. It was sort of a raspy, rattly voice. But they were all saying the same thing. I am. Do not be afraid. And she says, well, God has heard my prayer. God is going to set me free. God is going to give me a new path out of this terror and abuse and horror. She came out of that moment under his weight, and nothing changed. And she stayed in his house, and she grew up through the rest of her teenage years, and nothing changed. So she said, well, that was a bunch of you know what? She went to school. She went to graduate school. She went to graduate school again. She got a PhD in microbiology and became a university professor. Now, she thought she wasn't going to get married, and she said, I will never have children after what happened to me. Lo and behold, she met someone at the university. They got married. And despite their plans, perhaps, or maybe because they ended up with a child. And many of you who are parents know what happens. You have children, and whatever it is that you believe or whatever it is you think about the world, you say, what do I want them to have so that they can have a foundation, so that they can have a chance, so that they can explore the world and try and understand its meaning? So she said, we will go to church one time. We will go to church one time, and then I can write it off and say, see, I told you it wasn't true. But at least we tried it with the kid, so at least he had a chance. He was a toddler, he didn't know. She said, we went to church, and it was Easter Sunday. She said, we went to your church, and you stood in the front, and you said, I am, do not be afraid, and it was your voice I heard. It was your voice. And she said, I sat there terrified. This is years later, over a decade later. She said, I was in that church, I was so afraid I couldn't move because I was ready to leave, and then I realized it was true. And I realized it was real. And I'm reading this email going, say what? I didn't know that. I just thought, well, I have this to do today, and I have that to do today, and I have to go do this and do that. I wasn't an instrument. I wasn't planning anything except to get through church so I could go have lunch. She was coming to church so she could try church and put it aside. We all had our own plans, but then Easter happened, and it terrified her. And she was afraid. And she could not move. And this is a true story. She has it now tattooed on her wrists. I am. Do not be afraid. Her life has not been a straight line since that day. It's not like, well, now it's the end of a happy story. A lot's happened since. But what I want you to realize is Easter should terrify you. You think that God's not up to things, doing things beyond your understanding, beyond your planning, beyond your control. Oh, you are going to be terrified when you find out what God is up to. This is why Peter, when he meets Cornelius in Acts chapter 10, he's so surprised because Cornelius is a Roman centurion. Cornelius is one of the people making everyone else's life a living hell. Cornelius is one of the people that's told other people to put swords and to put people down and to make sure that they don't offend Rome. And now all of a sudden it looks like God is working in his life. And Peter says, I now know, I'm going to read it because I can't remember it. I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. That's a very powerful phrase, and it is one you should remember and highlight if you highlight such things or memorize it, because what it means is the power of Easter isn't just the conquering of death. It is the shaking loose of all your prejudices. It is the shaking loose of all your expectations. It is you believing that you know who's in and who's out, who's right and who's wrong, who are the people that get it. What about the people outside of our religion? What about the people outside our political beliefs? What about the people outside of our country? What about the people who are poorer than us, who are richer than us? What about all of these people? And he realizes God doesn't care about any of that. God shows no partiality. In every corner of the earth, even if they haven't had Sunday school or a missionary or a Bible, the Holy Spirit is spreading Easter everywhere. You don't think that when Jesus came out of the grave, Jesus is still doing this work? Just because you don't see what God is up to doesn't mean that God hasn't been busy, and you should be terrified because there is no one who will escape. People should be afraid. You know who should be afraid? Those who exploit the poor. They should be afraid. Those who commit injustice and use violence to tear down people's lives, they should be afraid. Those people who wonder if, in fact, any of this has any true meaning or if it's just a kind of repressing of our desires and beliefs, they should be afraid. There's something happening you don't understand. When he came out of the tomb, this is just the beginning of what God's up to and not the end. Part of the terror and the fear we should hear is that it's for those who are the victim and for those who are the violent, those who are the betrayers and those who have been betrayed. Death doesn't have power here. There is no power. It has been broken. This is the proclamation. And if you are here and you are part of the church, you become an ambassador from the future. You become a visitor from time travel because you are going to live according to the principles of what this is. This is what I've been trying to tell you if you've been here Thursday night and Friday. I told you, if you want to deploy the spiritual power of forgiveness, you will deploy the power of Easter. Make a concrete gesture of forgiving someone. Forgive one of your enemies. Forgive someone who hurt you. Forgive someone who messed up your life in a significant way. And not because you're saying what they did is okay. It's not. What you're saying is that got nailed to the cross too. That power has been broken, and you are an ambassador from the future. All of history is catching up to what God has done. I know many of you well. Some of you, you'll be glad I don't know you well, because then you won't be part of the sermon now. But I know some of you well. There are people in this church who have cancer in their wombs, cancer in their brains, cancer in their lungs. They are dying, but that power has been broken, and they can offer that to God. There are people here whose marriages are hanging just by a thread, people who don't talk to each other anymore when they're at home. And there's a very good chance they won't survive, at least what is now. Let the power of death and the power of Easter be a promise to those who are going to experience the death of a marriage. Let the power of Easter be a promise to all those who are living in a kind of spiritual dryness, who wonder if God has love and is love and can bring love, or people who wonder, does the world really have space for me? Or is there no space for me? Maybe I shouldn't even be here. There are those people, too, who wonder how long they should keep living. Even for those whose lives might be broken by suicide, God has taken care of that as well. What I'm trying to say to you is all of this brokenness, you will experience it because your life is catching up to Easter. But the power of Easter will show itself in the midst of the illness, in the midst of the death. In the midst of the brokenness, the power of Easter shall show itself. This is what's true about the world. So when I enjoin you and tell you, go and forgive someone, I'm not saying, let them go and keep breaking people. What I'm saying is that has no power here. And you are representing the future. That's why Jesus isn't the only one who shouldn't be sitting in a tomb anymore. There are many of you here who should hear, it is time for you to leave the tomb as well. So when people go, well, that's unusual, you shouldn't be acting that way. You shouldn't be that whole. You shouldn't be that free. You should say what the angel said, I am not there anymore. I do not sit there anymore. I have been connected to a greater power. I have been connected to a greater love. This is the truest thing about the world. Now, unlike me speaking from this microphone, this will all happen very quietly. God is knitting this future together into our lives very quietly, moment by moment, stitch by stitch. And God will do it. The healing will be quiet, and it will take time because we live in time. So if you find yourself discouraged engaging in this work, don't be afraid. That's the one thing you don't have to be afraid of, because He is risen. He is risen indeed. He is risen.